Hello, I'm Gemma and this is Non-Fic Books, and today I have a review video for you, and that is Harriet O'Brien's Queen Emma and the Vikings. And this was published in 2005 by Bloomsbury, and at 229 pages is a relatively short popular history book. And this is set in the 10th and 11th century in Britain, and it focuses on all of the sort of clashing cultures that were coming together at that time. She's Norman and she has a lot of family who later play a great role, including William the Conqueror, and then she is married to the Anglo-Saxon king Ethelred that we now know as the Unready, but then she is also later married to the Viking invader Knut, or Knut. It's C-N-U-T. If you know how to pronounce it, please give me the heads up below because I have absolutely no idea. And she plays a really seminal role in this time, and I'd never heard of her, so first off that was quite fascinating to find out about someone totally new. And so she comes across and is married relatively young to Ethelred, has a number of children with him, including one that later goes on to be Edward the Confessor. After his death she marries Knut and has further children with him, and then after his death fights varying different people, including some of her own children, to get particular of her sons put on the throne, and it varies which one she supports at different periods of time. And she is quite a formidable woman. When she was queen, she ended up playing quite strong roles in the politics, witnessing documents and advising, as far as the evidence suggests, advising the kings, as well as doing the more queenly roles of supporting churches and giving alms to the poor and things like that. But then she also had some major falls from grace, both after the death of husbands or once Edward the Confessor comes into play. She's stripped of all of her money and land for a while as well. And throughout it, she seems to very much be a strong personality who has been very badly criticised throughout history for being very manipulative, very unfeeling, but who does also seem to be strong enough to fight for herself and the rights of her family. And I always think you don't want to romanticise the past too much, and especially with strong women, you don't want to be too biased towards, oh, that's brilliant, they were so strong. But at the same time, a lot of history tends to be written by men, so if there are very strong female characters like that, they do tend to get rather slated. And Harriet O'Brien follows a lot of her life, from moving over to England to marry Ethelred up through to her death. And it's a really interesting life. She goes through so many changes, and in the end ends up commissioning a book. And a lot of this book focuses on that book that was written, and it's sort of a thread that follows through, even though it was only commissioned later on in her life. And this is a slight area where I think O'Brien's work falls down a little bit, because I think her criticism towards the book is a little bit unbalanced. There are points where she criticises it for being very biased, presenting an alternative history, and it does, but she then doesn't sort of put that in context of other books and other people doing exactly the same thing, especially when she's talking about some of the later chroniclers. And I think if you're going to discuss it should be discussed more fully. But then there are other times when she, I think, can be a little bit guilty of overly romanticising Emma, while at the same time being a very harsh critic, and it bounces between the two. And I think it would have been a lot better if there had been a slightly more solid interpretation of Emma, rather than, in a way, a little bit of a sort of emotional or subjective way of going throughout the book. The other thing that I really wish had been included in this book is more archaeological evidence. This is a time period where there are limited to few written records, a lot of which are very biased. History is written by the conqueror, and at that time there were a number of conquerors, and the later ones in particular definitely had very particular things that they were trying to portray about the past. And there is so much archaeological evidence about this period in time. I think it could have just helped make this book richer and more detailed, even though you can't necessarily tie the archaeology into particular individuals. I think it would have really helped build up the idea of the past and really helped showcase what it would have been like for them. But I trained in archaeology, so that's just a particular interest of mine, and something I found I was looking for that wasn't there. It may not be much of a concern for other people, but it is something that I really wish had been included. Overall, it is a really nice book. It's well written, her writing is very smooth flowing. There is a little bit of a thing at the beginning of every chapter. There's like a little bit of an imaginary section about this is maybe what would have happened, or presenting a little scene that's very fictional. And there's a few places where she does that actually in the text, sort of assuming what Emma may or may not have felt. And I think it would have been better most of the way through. She's very clear on when she's making guesswork or interpretive leaps, and where other places this is factual evidence. But there's a few places where she sort of is saying how Emma would have felt, rather than saying, I think she might have felt this. And I think that's always a problem when you come to historical books. If you don't know how they felt, if it hasn't been recorded, you've got to make it clear that it's your idea of what they felt, rather than any sort of known reaction that they had. But this is a really nice introduction to this time period. I didn't know who the key players were or anything like that, and with all their A's and E's and oofs, it could get a bit confusing at times, but thankfully at the beginning she has a nice little breakdown of who the main players are and a little bit of text about them, so that if you do get confused further on, she has that, and then some family trees as well at the beginning, which is very useful. And if you know loads about this time period, don't read this book. You won't learn anything. I mean, you can do, it's fun, it's an enjoyable read, but you probably won't get anything out of it. If you don't know anything, I thought this was a really nice sort of introductory starter's guide. It doesn't take you loads into detail, but it certainly caught my interest and made me want to find out more about this time period. So if you do know more than me about this, and you have other books to suggest that link to this sort of time period, please do leave information down below, because I definitely would like to learn more about this time period, because it is a really seminal part of the history of this country, and I think that's really interesting. So leave a message down below if you have a comment or a question, and hopefully I will see you in a video soon. Bye!